Hello everyone. I, Ms. Bhavana Danesh Munod, welcome you all in Agricultural Development Trust, Shardabai Pawar, Mahila Arts, Commerce and Science College, Sharda Nagar, Baramati. Good day, dear students. Last period we studied about linear demand curve and non-linear demand curve in point or geometric method that is related to calculation of elasticity of demand children. Now we are coming to next point in our chapter, that is factors influencing elasticity of demand. Which are the factors which will influence elasticity of demand? So let us see one by one factor children. The first one is nature of commodity. Now see, by nature we can classify commodities like comfort is there, luxurious goods are there. Comfort zone, that is refrigerators, washing machines, luxurious goods. These are comfort. Necessary goods are food, clothing and shelter. So demand for necessary goods like food grains, medicines, textbooks, etc. they have told is relatively inelastic. And for comfort and luxury goods like cars, perfumes, furniture, etc., demand they have told is relatively elastic. And we have seen what is inelastic and elastic children. Inelastic means price changes, even the demand doesn't get affected. Say fall or rise in price, demand will not get affected, that is coming under necessary goods. And price changes, demand is affected over here, that is called as relatively elastic. So they have told regarding necessary goods, that is comfort and luxurious goods, the elasticity of demand will be children relatively inelastic. And for luxurious goods, elasticity of demand will be children relatively elastic. Now we come to a second point regarding factors influencing elasticity of demand is availability of substitutes. Now what they have told over here, demand for commodity will be more elastic if its close substitutes are available in the market. Like for example, lemon juice, sugarcane juice, etc. they will have more elastic. And the commodities which will have no close substitutes like salt, the demand will be inelastic children. We all know substitute goods, their demand what they have told will be more elastic. And for substitute goods which are not closer to each other like salt, not closer to each other, that demand will be inelastic children. Now we come to a third function of elasticity of demand, that is number of uses. Now single use goods have a less elastic demand children, but multi-purpose goods, multi-use goods will have more elastic demand. For example, they have told coal electricity will be having more elastic demand, and single use goods, single handed goods will have less elastic demand. So the measurement over here for necessary goods, luxurious goods have been given, close substitutes and no close substitutes also they have given. Then in the third function, that was number of uses children, in that less elastic demand is measured for single use goods, and multi-use goods more elastic demand has been measured. Then come to our fourth one, habits. So habits, what over here? Habits make demand for certain goods relatively inelastic children. So example, we all know habitual goods, addictive goods are there, alcoholic person is there, drugs, etc. Reading books or stories. These are coming under habits, and what will be their elasticity of demand children? Relatively inelastic. Now durability, come to the fifth function children, durability. Now durability means what? Long lasting goods, long lasting goods children. So for these durable goods, it is relatively elastic. So for example, they have told furniture, washing machine, etc. Their demand will be what? Elastic children. So demand for durable goods, it will be relatively elastic. But demand for perishable goods means what children? Goods will vanish immediately, goods will destroy immediately. For that it will be inelastic. So for example, milk, vegetables, they have come under perishable goods. So durable goods will be long lasting, furniture, example washing machine, they are relatively elastic. And perishable goods, their demand will be relatively inelastic children. Now the second type of good or functions of say elasticity of demand is complementary goods. Now complementary goods, we all types of goods we have studied, children. So complementary goods, what they told, that the demand for a commodity which is used in conjunction with other commodities to satisfy a single want is relatively inelastic. So for example, a fall in the price of mobile handsets may lead to rise in the demand for SIM cards. See, these are what complementary goods means. Example, clearly they have told children, if a mobile handset price is less, people will go for SIM cards also. Demand for SIM cards. Why? Because that particular price of mobile handsets is reduced, is less. This may increase the demand of SIM cards. So demand for commodity in complementary goods is used for. So demand for complementary or say conjunction commodity which is used in conjunction with other commodities to satisfy a single want, they have told is relatively inelastic. So example also they have given for complementary goods, that a fall in the price of mobile handsets may lead to rise in the demand for SIM cards. Then the seventh one, children, is income of the consumer, and we have all studied income is affecting the demand. So demand for goods for income state is usually inelastic, because if the consumer has high income, the demand for a very rich and extremely poor person will be different. They will get affected by significant change in price. Means, suppose a person is earning a higher salary, he will purchase more goods. But if a person is earning less salary, children, less income is there, then that time demand will be affected. So inelastic. So demand for income is usually inelastic. Now the eighth one, children, is urgency of needs. So goods which are urgently needed will have relatively inelastic demand. Urgency goods, for example medicines. Luxurious goods which are urgent have relatively elastic demand. Means urgency need goods, they will have what? Inelastic demand. Means example medicines. In emergency, medicines will be, children, relatively inelastic. And for luxurious goods, it will be relatively elastic demand. Then time period, the ninth one, that is time period. Elasticity of demand is always related to period of time, children, they have told. It varies with the length of time period. And generally speaking, longer the duration of period, greater will be the elasticity of demand, and vice versa. That means time, according to the time, how much time period is there, more longer, there will be greater demand and elasticity will be there with greater demand. And exactly opposite, if the period is duration is less, children, then elasticity of demand is less. So it varies, means it changes according to the time period. Now for example, say summer season, we use what? Cotton clothes, children. Now summer season is for how many months? Say 4 months. But after 4 months monsoon starts, so the demand for raincoat will be more rather than what? Cotton clothes. So depending upon time period about your product, they have told, or exactly opposite can be, the length of time period depends upon the person how much they want. So they have told that elasticity of demand is always related to period of time, and it changes according to the length of time period. So generally speaking, longer the duration of period, whatever it will be there, greater will be the elasticity of demand, and vice versa. And this is because a consumer can change the consumption habits in the long run in the favor of cheap substitutes of the commodities. So these were what, children, functions related to elasticity of demand, where elasticity of demand will be higher elastic or inelastic. Now for your basic knowledge, there is a table given in your textbook which tells us you should know the determinants, nature and price elasticity of demand, children. So we will just go through this. They have told for first one, availability of factors, if they are abundant, relatively elastic. If they are few, relatively inelastic. For nature of commodity, necessary goods C, relatively inelastic. Luxurious goods, relatively elastic. Then come the third one, habits. Habituated goods, relatively inelastic. Not habituated, relatively elastic. Now we come to fourth time period. The fourth time period is, children, short term relatively inelastic, long term relatively elastic. Postponement of consumption, possibility of postponement relatively elastic. Impossible postponement relatively inelastic. So the number of uses of a commodity, if they are several, it will be relatively inelastic. If the number of uses of a commodity is specific or less, children, it will be relatively inelastic. So this was related to functions of elasticity of demand only, but a few points were mentioned when necessary goods was there. Necessary goods, the measurement for elasticity of demand is relatively inelastic. For luxurious goods, the measurement is relatively elastic. Habituated goods, relatively inelastic, children, or relatively elastic for not habituated goods. So everywhere the demand and prices will change, children. Now we come to our next point in this chapter, children, that is importance of elasticity of demand. Now, importance of elasticity of demand, children. The concept of elasticity of demand, they have told it was a great importance to farmers, workers and the government. And Lord Keynes considered this concept to be the most important contribution to Alfred Marshall. Significance of the concept becomes clear from the following applications. So this elasticity of demand is a very important function to study, as well as Lord Keynes considered this concept to the most important contribution of Alfred Marshall. Now the first importance of this elasticity of demand is to producer. Now how for producer it is helpful, children? Every producer has to decide the price of the product at which he has to sell it. And for this purpose, elasticity of demand becomes very important, children. If the demand for a product is relatively inelastic, he will pick up at a higher price and vice versa. And the concept of elasticity of demand is also useful to a monopolist to practice price discrimination. Now we will go in detail like what they have told, importance of a producer, how it is helpful in elasticity of demand. See, every producer has to decide the price of the product, and it is compulsory. Why? Because they have to sell further the particular product. And for putting up the price of the product, children, it is utmost important that the producer should know elasticity of demand and then sell the product. So it becomes very important. Why? Because if the product is relatively inelastic, the producer has to fix up a higher price. And if the product is relatively elastic, then the producer will keep lower price. So the concept of elasticity of demand, children, is also very important for monopolists, that is single seller, we have studied. Why this we required? So that product price can be determined, children. That's why importance to a producer, elasticity of demand is required. Now we come to the second point, children, that is importance to government. Now how for government this elasticity of demand is important, children, we will see. See, for government, the taxation policy of the government is based on the concept of elasticity of demand. These commodities whose demand is relatively inelastic will be taxed more because it will not affect the demand much and vice versa. Now what they have told that related to taxation policy of the government, it depends upon elasticity of demand. So these commodities who is having relatively inelastic demand will be taxed more because it will not affect their demand much and vice versa. Means importance of government. Why? If government knows about particular product elasticity of demand, and if government put charge higher rates of tax, it will not affect demand. So that is called as importance of the government, and that only people say or products say. So that only, children, that these commodities whose demand is relatively inelastic will be taxed more and it will not affect the demand much, children. And the product who is relatively elastic will be taxed less, but the things will not affect on demand. Then the third importance in factor pricing it is. Now how the factor pricing will be getting affected, children? The concept of elasticity of demand is useful in determination of factor prices. So the factor of production for which demand is relatively inelastic can command a higher price as compared to those having elastic demand. So the concept of elasticity of demand, what they have told, is useful in determination of factor prices. Now we studied in government, say taxation policy can be done with the help of elasticity of demand. Then producer, we have seen in the first point, for producers it will be helpful to determine the prices. Then the third one is important in factor pricing means what, children? The concept of elasticity of demand is useful in determination of factor prices. So the factor of production was for which demand is relatively inelastic, that is can command a higher price as compared to those having elastic demand. So these were importance of elasticity of demand for producer, government and factor pricing. Now see, factor pricing example they have given, children, in your textbook, that for example they have told workers can ask for higher wages if the demand for the product produced by them is relatively inelastic. Naturally, workers, if they know that their production has been successful, it is having more demand in the market, children, when they come to know that their product is relatively inelastic, then workers can charge or say request the producer or the manager of the company to increase their wages, to increase their salary. So more important regarding factor pricing. Then the fourth point, children, in importance is importance in foreign trade. Now what they have told regarding foreign trade, the concept of elasticity of demand is very useful to determine terms and conditions in foreign trade. And we all know from foreign what is coming as oil, say for an example. So the exporting countries commodities for which demand is relatively inelastic can raise their prices, children. For example, they have told regarding Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. So what they have told, Organization of Petroleum Products, they have told which have increased the price of oil several times, and the concept is also useful in formulating export and import policy of a country. So the concept of elasticity of demand, they have told, is very useful to determine the terms and conditions in foreign trade. And the countries exporting commodities. So we all know OPEC is an example given in your textbook regarding exporting, that exporting country, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, they have increased the price of oil several times, and now also we see that the petroleum products are increased. Now at present it is 100 rupees, children, or it may be more, 110 or 120. So the petroleum price have been increased. Why it is increasing several times? Because of relatively inelastic demand, children. So the concept is also useful in formulating export and import policy of a country. Now the fifth important point is, children, importance to public utilities. Now what happens, public utilities, we all know, every time I have repeated this example, under public transport facility what is coming? Railways. So this railway is having an inelastic demand, children. So government can neither subsidize or nationalize them to avoid consumers' exploitation. See, subsidize means what? Cannot give too much concession also, children. Or nationalize means cannot increase too much higher rates also. Why? Now for example, railway, whatever railways government has made, it is a public utility, public transport. And railway is a more convenient thing where common people also can travel, children. So here they have told that government cannot subsidize also and nationalize, means cannot increase or decrease the rate every time. It will not be profitable. So government has to make a proper decision due to inelastic demand, and stop consumers exploitation, means stop, say, harassing common public. Don't increase the railway ticket every time by 100 rupees. It will not be possible. It will not be profitable for common people then to travel here and there, children. So they have told to avoid consumers exploitation, means consumers should not be exploited more. Exploitation means what? They should not be destroyed, money should not be taken from them more. So during this public utilities, they have told, like railways which have an inelastic demand, government can either subsidize or nationalize them to avoid consumers exploitation. Then the sixth one, children, is proportion of expenditure. Now what they have told in proportion of expenditure, children, it is a person's income is small in the proportion of the expenditure, the demand for that product is relatively inelastic. So for example, newspapers, children. So for that, what will happen? The demand will be relatively inelastic, that is proportion of expenditure, children. So we have studied about public utilities, railways, then proportion of expenditure. So if the proportion of expenditure in a person's income is small, then demand for that particular product will be relatively inelastic. For example, newspapers. Say the newspapers, what is the amount we hardly purchase now? It will be 5 or 10 rupees we purchase a newspaper, and daily then people purchase. So that rate is too less. So when depends upon person's income is small, the demand for the product is relatively inelastic. For example, they have told newspapers. So this all we studied, children, in, say, we started from factors influencing the elasticity of demand, where we studied about nature of commodity, availability of substitutes, number of uses, habits, durability, complementary goods, income of the consumer, urgency needs, and time period. So this all we studied in elasticity of demand. Then we also came to the next point, that is importance of elasticity of demand, children. In that we studied importance to a producer, importance to a government, importance in factor pricing, importance in foreign trade, public utilities, and proportion of expenditure. So this was related to factors and importance regarding affecting elasticity of demand. Now see one positive quote I mentioned here: adopting the right attitude can convert a negative stress into a positive one, children. So be always positive, have confidence in yourself, and do the best. So next period we will meet together. Till then, bye. Thank you.